The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, and welcome to our second webinar. I'm Mike Mengen, and I will let you know how to work with variables in the Widget Designer. This webinar will be recorded, and we will upload it on our YouTube channel soon. You can already find our webinar from yesterday on our YouTube channel. You can find the link for that in our forum. Werner, my colleague, will answer your questions like we did with Thomas yesterday.
Hello from my side. So, who was not in the webinar yesterday, there's a little question section where you can ask questions, and Mike will answer them as soon as we get time for it. Enjoy that webinar.
Yeah, from time to time, I will ask Werner if there are any upcoming questions that I can answer. So feel free to ask some questions in the comments. All right. So first I will start by what do I need variables for? After that, I will explain you what kind of variable types they are available in the Widget Designer and what they are for. After that, I'll explain you the difference between global and local variables, and I also show you how to script with the variables. Okay, so what do I need variables for? Variables can be used for flexible access to certain values. You can also use them if you need to use some kind of value multiple times or at multiple locations, like in scripts. You can also use them for saving different values or data, for mathematical calculations, and there are a lot of commands in the Widget Designer which require a variable to retrieve a value. All right, so let's have a look what kind of variables we have available in the Widget Designer. So we got string, integer, double, Boolean, date, list, and JSON. So those are all the variables we have available in the Widget Designer. In this webinar, I will not talk about JSON and list variables. This will be covered in a different webinar. Okay, so let's start with the string variable. So a string can be used to receive and display nearly every kind of data type. So it ASCII text. So that means it can be letters, numbers, and any kind of characters. The string variable also has a large amount of members, so the text can be formatted and analyzed. I show you that later in the Widget Designer, how to do that. A string needs to be enclosed in single or double quotation marks, so like you can see in the example down here. I also show you an example when to use single and when to use double quotation marks. In this example, it wouldn't matter if you use single or double quotation marks. I come to that later again. So the next variable is the integer. This has been used for expressing numbers. So an integer is a whole number. It's an int 32, so 32-bit. 31-bit, as you can see, is used for expressing the value. Maximum value you can see here. And 1-bit is used if it's positive or negative. Then we have the double. Double is a floating point number with 64-bit, and the length is 63-bit. So that means the length is as precise as 63-bit can display. And again, as in the integer, 1-bit is used for positive or negative. Are there any questions so far?
Nothing at the moment.
All right. So let's continue with the Boolean. So the Boolean is used for conditional statements, and it can have two possible values. So it can have true or false. In other words, the Boolean is used to express 0 and 1 in a different way as true and false. So that means on and off. Then we have the date variable. This can store date and time information, and it has some members to decide which value you want to access. I'm going into that in the Widget Designer later. Yeah. Last variable is the color variable. It can contain an 8-bit color information about red, green, blue, and alpha, and it's been displayed as a hexadecimal code. All right, let's go over to the Widget Designer. So, are there any questions to the variable types so far?
Nothing at the moment.
All right. So, how do we create a variable? We can go to scripting up here and open the variables here. This will open up the variable list. In here you can see all the global variables which have been created. To create a new variable, you can do a right click and say create, and there you get a list of all the variables. So we are going to create a string now. So we can give it a name here. I call that one string. Make sure this name here is unique and there's no space in between. Okay, so there you can assign a value to it and you can decide if it should be locked or not. So if you lock that variable, you cannot change it anymore. So if you have a static value which shouldn't change, you can lock it, otherwise leave this unticked. Okay, so I press OK to create that variable, as you can see here. And now there are 3 different ways to change the value of that variable. The first way is by doing a right click on it, edit, and simply apply a value in here. Second way, you can use the variable inside of the node system. So there are 2 nodes available, an input node to receive the value under generic, and then variable, and an output node under output, again generic, and the variable output. So if you want to use that variable in your node system, you can use those 2 nodes. The third way is by using scripts. So for that, I'm going to create a custom script button. I will open the script window here, the item properties. And now I can simply access that variable by typing in the variable name. Now you can already see, get that here in our script assistant. So I can select that variable. And now there are different ways to assign a value to it. You can say equals, and then, as I said, string needs to be enclosed in quotation marks. So I start with the quotation marks, and I do it like in the example. Okay, so with this script, I can assign that value to the variable. When I do a right click on here and say test to execute that line, and I create a label, a bit larger, and then I'll display the variable here so I can directly see what's inside of my variable. So I put in the variable name. Now you can see there's hello world. If I change that and execute the line, you can also do that with Control T. You can see it updates here as well. Okay, so this is how you override a variable. String can also be stacked up by multiple strings. So if I don't want to override the whole variable, I can also say variable string plus equals, and every time I execute the line, you can see it adds an hello. All right, so are there any questions so far?
Yes. Are variables available in the free version of the Widget Designer?
Yeah, yes and no. So you cannot use the variables which are up here. So those variables are only in the are not in the free version available, but you can use local variables. I show you how to use them later.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's see what I can do with my variable here. So I can also use members, so variable string. And if I add dot behind that, I get a lot of options for members I can use. So in my example, I will use the replace. So let us assign something else to that variable. So A, comma, B, comma, C, so on. Okay, so I will assign that now to my variable. And then with the member replace here, I can, for example, replace the comma with a dot. Sorry, forgot. The member is not changing the variable. So the variable stays the same. So it only changes the return value. So if I create a second label here, okay, and I will change the label text equals variable string. So if I execute that now, you can see in my label it changed to dot. But my original variable is still with a comma. So the members you use here are not changing the original variable. In case you want to change the variable, you simply need to repeat that here. So you basically say variable string equals variable string dot replace. So this will override the variable here. Now you can see also the original variable changed. Okay, so let's have a look at the next variable type. So the next variable is the integer. So do right click in here again to create new variable, integer, give it a name. and press OK to create it. Okay, I will change that here too to the integer variable so we can see what's inside. Okay. Again, put in the variable name. And now we can set it to something specific like 15. And you can see it directly changes here in our label. I can also use that variable for counting. So I can simply say variable int plus equals 1. And every time I execute that script, you can see the variable counts up by 1. So I can go and copy that button here, change this one to a minus. So also in the script, minus equals 1. Now you can see, can count up and count down here. For resetting the variable, I can create another button, call it reset, and say variable int equals 0. This will set it directly to 0. All right, any questions so far?
Yes, can you please repeat the operation in the label, how to make the variables visible?
Oh, yeah, sure. So if you open the item properties, so you can either do a right click on that label and go to label properties, or if you're in the edit move mode, you can do a double click on that label. This will open up the item properties. And if you have a look here in the label properties, there's a checkbox for variable source. If you check that, you can enter a variable name and it will always display the variable.
Thank you.
Okay, so let us create a double. So we go to scripting again, variables, and we will create a double. Okay, so I'm going to replace var int with var double now for all of my scripts. Okay, here as well. And in my label, var double. Okay, now I can basically do the same thing as with the integer. But now I also have the opportunity to use comma separated or dot separated values. So I can say plus equals 1.3. And here I want to have minus 1.8. Now you can see it's a floating value now. Okay. Any questions for that?
Nothing at the moment.
All right. We got also the date variable. I've already created a date variable, which contains the date and time, the beginning of our webinar. So if I open here script again, I can enter the variable name again. Let me put that in a debug message. So here we can see what's inside of this variable. The date variable also contains some members. So if I put a dot behind this variable, get some options. So I can decide if I only want to retrieve the year. So this will only give me 2020. Or I can also check for the day of week. This will return me value 5. So that means it is Friday. So yeah, weekend is coming. Okay. Yeah. Last variable type we have is the color variable. So again, go to create color variable. Okay. Type in the variable name. And now again, you can do the dot for the members. So first we need to set a color to that. So I say set RGB, 255 for red, 128 for green, and 0 for blue. If I execute that line, this will set my color variable. So I can go now and check it's label 4. So I can set my label 4. That's 4 color. Can also go here dot and then say set RGB. Then I take my color variable. Now I want the red value. A bit larger so you can see that better. So I copy that. Here for green and here for blue. So when I execute that, you can see my label color changed here. Right, any questions to that?
Does it have to be set RGB or can it be hexadecimal as well?
Actually, I'm not sure right now if you can also put that in hexadecimal in there. Set RGB. I think you can. Not sure if you can put it in hexadecimal in there. Okay. Yeah, if you could pass that question to the support email, can give you an answer to that.
I will answer that. One more question. How are you doing the zoom in the text?
Yeah, so in the script windows here, you can, if you click in there, you can zoom by pressing Control on your keyboard and then using your mouse wheel to zoom in. So that does work in all of the script windows here and also in the debug logger.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, another variable is the Boolean. So I already created a Boolean here, which I called log. So you can see it's set to true right now. And if I press this button down here, it will change to false and to true. So if I open that custom script button here, in the first line, you can see I set the custom script label to locked. And in the second line, I override the lock variable to true. And in the onRelease script, I'm doing the opposite. So I'm setting the label to unlocked and the lock variable to false. So what I did here, the lock variable is used here in the next button for page 2. So if it's locked, I cannot switch to page 2. If it's unlocked, I can do it. So that's a simple you can see a simple if statement here. So if locked equals false, then go to page 2. And if it's untrue, it ignores that and it skips it. Okay, so let's have a look at the local variables. So everything we did now was with global variables. So all of the variables you can find here in the variable list are global variables. That means they are available in every script. A local variable, if we open here custom script button, so a local variable can be defined inside of a script. We need the indicator VAR for that. Then we need a space, and then we need to enter the name of the variable we want to create. So we call that local var. And now equals. Now we need to decide what kind of variable we want to have. So in the variable list, you could decide if you want to have a string, an integer, a double. With the local variables, it's done automatically by the Widget Designer, but we need to define that. So if I add here 2 quotation marks, a local variable will be created as a string. So if I put there 0 in there, it will be an integer. If I put 1.2 in there, it will be in double. So that way I can define what kind of variable it should be. So I will let's say 0. Okay, so this way I can create a variable, a local variable. So if I go down here now, I can type in local, and you already see in the script assistant local var is here. So I can, I put that in the debug message here. Something else. If I execute that, you can see in the debug logger here the value which is inside of the local var. So when using local variables, the local variables only available in this script window here. So if you want to access that variable in the next script window, it doesn't work. So if I put here local in, you can only see local count up, local IP, but not local variable. So local variables are only available in one script window. I have an example here. So when I clear that, okay, I have here a button for count up to 10 for global and for local variable. So if I press that button here, a variable counts up to 10. The local one does the same thing here. All right. can also show you the script for that. I have that in a macro. So here you can see I'm setting the variable count to 0, and then there's a for script which repeats the script here 10 times. It counts up +1 each time, waits half a second, and then outputs it to the debug logger here. So there's another script for the local variable, and it's basically the same script, only that I have created a local variable up here. Everything else is the same. So if I press that once, and then a second time, now both macros, or now two scripts, are running at the same time. As you can see, it counts up to 15, as the script is always referring to the global variable which is inside here. So in each script, in each node, this variable has always the same value. If you're using local variables, they're kind of independent. So as you can see, each variable is counting up to 10. So it's not the same variable, they're independent. All right, any questions for local variables?
Yes. How do you define the local variable? As a list of variables or a JSON variable?
Yeah. This is not part of this webinar, but you can do it. So for JSON, for example, you can say quotation mark here, open the curly bracket, close the curly bracket, and then quotation mark. There's also, I think, a .to JSON. Sorry, yes, there it is. So this variable will be created as a JSON. A list. Let me think. What was a list? I think we need the square brackets. Think like that, but I'm not 100% sure that's correct. Yeah, but I think it's similar this way, or you can create JSON on a list.
And one more question. Are there any systems which help you to avoid errors caused by different types? For example, multiplying a string and an integer.
Yeah, I think the debug logger will give you an error message if there's anything the widget cannot process. So like multiplying a string with an integer.
Thank you.
All right, so if you have some more complex mathematical operations, you can do it with .math. So let's say we want to create, we want to calculate an area of a circle. So for that we need the radius. So we create a local variable here, call it R for radius. Let's say it is 14.2. I will create a variable for the area, which I define to 0 right now, or to 0.0, to make it as a double. And then I can add my mathematical operation here. So I can say math.pi multiplied by the radius square 2, like this. And then I can put that at A, so area equals math.pi. and then I put that in a label, v.text equals A. Right. Now you can see the result of that operation here in the label, and the result is still wrong because all of the mathematical rules still apply in the widget designer. So consider the order when doing mathematical operations, and remember to set the brackets here. Okay, and now you can see the result in the label. You can also directly round with a number. So if you don't want to have the long number here, you can say a.round. And I want to have 2 values after the dot. And you can see the rounded result down here in the label. Yeah, any questions to that?
No, thank you.
All right. Yeah, so that was it about the variables. If you got any questions or feedback, just contact us in our support email or phone number. If you have any ideas, you can put that on our forum for the next webinars. And also, as I said, this webinar has been recorded and you will find that on our YouTube channel. Are there any general questions for variables I can answer?
Nothing at the moment. I would just tell you that I would put all the links you're just seeing in our forum, where you find the link for this webinar. I will put all these links. Thank you from my side as well.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for joining the webinar, and I hope to see you next time.
See you guys. Bye.
See you.